Yeah, I have. It's very interesting work to see. Okay. The work sounds very interesting. We look at from our perspective here, where we see your work is quite complex, in its sections and its material applications. I would like to know, how do you meet the challenges to convert those ideas and complex, the shapes
Well,
on the site?
yeah, one thing, like these buildings would be a joke trying to build them in this climate here. They wouldn't be appropriate at all. It's like, you have all these different regions, so your buildings should reflect every region. My region is, wood country, where we build a great deal of work in wood. But as I said earlier, every site has its sense of poetry. And this site was a very soft flowing site that, really called for very sensuous lines to balance the softness of the landscape. So with that, and with a budget that I knew the client can afford that, and also knowing that one of the major requirements he had was great acoustic sound on the inside, I went with a curved roof that would give me the acoustical sound I wanted with a wood roof, so that when the sound hit that ceiling, it would resonate out. It's like a violin. They build a violin out of wood for a particular reason, and when sound hits the wood ceiling, it does the same thing. And when you have sound, if you have non-parallel surfaces, you're going to get better sound effect. Then you have to balance that with hard surfaces for sound to bounce off of, soft surfaces to absorb the sound. So those things were all being taken into consideration in the design of the house. And then in terms of material vocabulary, in this particular project, the client was open to whatever I felt was going to be appropriate to the site. And in this particular one, since I started with the wood glulam beams and the curvature, I wanted to carry that rhythm throughout. And shingles, which was a material that previously I hated and didn't like, I said to myself, for this particular house, this is the most appropriate material to use because it's the easiest one to follow all the curvatures I wanted to do. So even though it was a material that I personally didn't care for too much, I decided it was the right material to use, so I needed to find a way to use it appropriately. And then I don't like to have a really large vocabulary of materials, but if I have a client that wants to have, he says they love wood, I'll tell them great, but if you want to really appreciate this wood, you should play it off against another material so you can see the beauty of that wood. So in this case, I'm trying to play one material off from the other, but I want to tie it into a continuous composition. So, I had the shingles that were running from the outside and they would come in, and then you saw that kind of blue color, which was a plaster material that was on the inside of the house, and it ran out into the soffits on the outside of the house. And then I had a transition where I wanted to reflect the beauty of the land around. So between the soffit and the shingle walls, I had a section that I used a mirror, and to get the right color mirror, I chose a peach color so that it would relate nicely to the shingle wood and then to the copper that was going to be above, because the exterior waterproof membrane on the curved surfaces, I wanted to do that in copper. So you have all these different materials and forms, and that's where composition comes in. How do you make a transition from one material to the next material? There's basically three ways of doing it. You can just do it through dominancy, where one material just completely dominates the next material, or you can do it through identity, where you have the same material just constantly going until it goes to the next material. More in when you're doing identity, that's done more in form, where you're going from maybe a big circle to a small circle, and you do it in a series of circles, working your way down. Or you can do it all in a transitional state, where you're making small steps that are each a transition from one form or one material to the next material. So that's the composition that I don't think about consciously when I'm working, but is subconsciously there, and that I'm working on it. And for me personally, I'm not a very spiritual person, but I have a lot of dualities in life and in my thinking. And I'll start a design by, looking at the property and looking at the client's program, and that will generate an idea. And it's only one idea, but it's the best idea I have in that moment in time. And in reality, there's an infinite number of ideas that can solve any problem. That's why when, every architect does something different, because everyone has a different idea. And even for yourself, you might have an idea for a building and you use it, and that idea, would totally change if you had the exact same client, the same site, and the same building to do 10 years later. You'd have a different idea because you'd have 10 years of experience to build upon. So you'd naturally do something a little bit different. So the idea is just the best idea you have at that moment in time. And then I just kind of think about it for a while and try to get a picture of just kind of the general emotional feeling of everything in my mind. And then once I think it's there, then I'll sit down and I'll complain for a week that I have to work and just be upset that I have to do some work. And then the next week would be spent getting all the preconceived ideas I've had in my mind in the past and get them out of my mind, because I might be sitting waiting for a job to come in, and I might be thinking about, this great cathedral or civic center I want to design, but in comes a chicken coop to design. Well, you have to get rid of all those grand ideas that you wanted to do and do the greatest chicken coop you're capable of. So that second week is spent getting all the ideas out of preconceived ideas out of your mind. And then the third week is spent crying to yourself that you're washed up, you're no good, you have no ideas, you can't come up with anything, the best things are behind you, and you should just give the client back his money and walk away. But by the fourth week, an idea comes to you, and all of a sudden you think you're the greatest thing on earth, and you just start to roll and start moving. And once you start moving, for me, it's like some force takes over itself, and it's telling me, okay, do this, do that, do this, now do this. And I feel like I'm just following some instruction that some invisible force behind me is telling me what to do, and I'm just a robot following instructions. But what it really is the subconscious mind doing design, thinking about how I make this transition, how I do this, and how I do that. And then the rest of it is just months and months of hard work. But basically that's how I design. Well, thank you. Anyone else have any last questions?
Yeah, this Japanese project which you got, this project in Japan,
Uh-huh.
was this the only project you got outside the US, or you did some more outside the US?
I've done, a number of projects for the same client in Japan, and I'm still doing projects for him in Japan. I've had the opportunity to do projects in other countries, but for different reasons I've turned them down. For example, I was asked to do a project in Saudi Arabia, but what they wanted to do is, and I'm not a famous architect, so I can't go in and say, you have to write me $1 million retainer. I'm just a little, one-man, two-man shop. So, this man wanted me to design this building in Saudi Arabia, and he said, I'll pay you a small amount to do it, and then a big amount after I sell the building. But how am I going to be able to collect my money, after he sells the building? First of all, it's in Saudi Arabia. Will I even know if the building's ever sold or not? And once it's sold, how do I know he's going to pay me? And I'm not going to be able to go to Saudi Arabia and sue him and get the money. So, a small commission getting paid up front, a very small part, which would have meant that I would have had to pay out of my pocket to do that design. I had to turn that down because I had no way of collecting. Now, the first time I did a project in Japan, he paid in advance. But now, we've been together for 25 years. We're good friends. It's a different relationship now. I know that whatever I do, he's going to pay me. And they have a different culture. And in their culture, and which goes through a lot of countries in Asia, but not all, and I don't know about all of them, but if you as an architect do something for them and they decide they don't want to do it, they don't pay you. They only pay you if they're going to do what you draw. But the drawings always come first. So if you're not going to get paid, you're going to be losing a great deal of money. And that's why on the first job I made him pay ahead of time. But now that we're friends and have a good relationship, I know that if I do something for him, which I've done a number of times, a project that he decided, well, no, we changed our mind, we're not going to, do this project. I don't bother sending him a bill, because if I sent him a bill and he paid it, he would lose face with his own accounting department in his company, because they'll say, why are you paying him this money? We didn't use the project. But because of a long working relationship with him, I know that in either June he gives all his employees get a bonus, and in December, at the end of December, all the workers get a bonus, which is, depending on how good the business did that year, could be equal to their salary that they got for the full year. So I always know that at the end of the year, if I worked on a project that didn't go ahead, I'm going to get this, what they would call a bonus check, but it's actually the check to pay me for the work I did. But in other countries, like in Romania, I was contacted to do work, but they all wanted to you do the work and then we'll pay you, but there's no way you can collect, so you have to say no to those projects. I always think to myself, why should I trust them? They want me to do something, why don't they just trust me? So it's difficult. If I was a big famous architect, I can walk in and say, give me $1 million and I'll start working on your project, but nobody knows who I am.
Quality nice.
Okay, well, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I hope this way you got to see things better than me just going through the slide presentation.
Absolutely. I mean, a few projects, but we went through it in depth.
Yeah.
We could really learn something, see your thought process. Thank you so much for coming and sharing.
Well, thank you.
And you're most welcome to come back anytime, next time you're here, and show us some more of your work.
Okay. Oh, I should have showed you just real quickly, just show them the last two things I'm doing right now. Just real quick. It'll just take a moment, but it's quite different from my other stuff.
You didn't speak anything on your commercial buildings.
Pardon me?
You didn't speak anything on your commercial buildings.
The first 10 years was almost all commercial buildings I did, but the residential buildings were just so much more fun. But you can find them on my website, commercial
Religious
buildings.
building. In fact, I think that would have. There was one religious building, if I'm not.
Yeah, on my website there will be, you can find commercial buildings that were built and commercial buildings that weren't built. You know, just go to, you know, the very end of the slideshow. This is a spec house that I'm going to start construction on in next spring, and on downhill sites, you know, I come up with 2 stem walls that are the structural supports, and then the building is kind of floating in air so that stormwater and rainwater can drain right through the site. I don't have to do excavation work, so I don't have to worry about landslides. And then as you get up, the house will then flower and open up into more of a colorful flower. Let's go to the one in Nebraska. Nebraska. Yeah, this one right over here. This is a project I'm working on now, and it's on a lake in the Midwest of the United States. And it has to be high up in the air for 2 reasons. One was that there's an earthen dam, because this is a stormwater control pond, and you have to build the structure so it's above the dam, so that this water is going to rise up to that balcony level at times and then go back down. Plus the client wanted the structure high enough so that he got above the earthen dam so he can see sun rises, and then in the other direction he was able to see the sunset. So it was just a little retreat house for him that I'm working on right now, but I won't spend any more time on it, but it just kind of gives you an idea of something I'm working on now. And I try to do every project as a different project, because like a painter doesn't want to paint the same painting twice. As an architect, I don't want to do the same building twice. Some architects do the same building over and over again, and that's their right to do what they want to do. But I always say to myself, if you're going to do the same building for 30 times in a row, by gosh, you should get it right after the 10th time. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Someone seems to be very eager to show us your hand drawings. Please.
Yeah.
He's
Without Steph, I'd be totally lost. I wouldn't know how to get any place. I wouldn't know what I'm doing, what time I'm doing something, where I'm staying. He's had everything on this trip planned out for me.
Gaurav, get the lights.
Now he insists on showing drawings, which I'm not interested in. But these are just hand drawings back in the early 70s. And this was a 7-story commercial building, just on the edge of downtown Portland. That's, section through it, elevation below, a section through the building.
These are when you were presenting to the client, is it? These drawings? concept drawings or?
When I present to the, well, on the commercial clients, it's one thing. The commercial clients, and this is one of the things why I didn't enjoy commercial work, is with the commercial clients, all they care about is how much square footage they can build, how many cars they can park, and how inexpensive you can build the building so they can see how much money they're making. So if you can give them a building that gives them as much square footage as possible and at an affordable price, they'll pencil it out and see if they're going to make money. And if it's going to make money, they don't even care what it looks like. So like some of these times, you know, these were drawings when I was in my 20s, and I wouldn't say more excited about architecture, but more excited about drawing. You know, I would sit down and do the drawings, but the clients, all they wanted to see was a floor plan and tell me how much it's going, how many square feet I have, and how much it's going to cost me to build, and I'll tell you whether I'll build it or not. So, you know, this type of thing I did for myself, and I never use models in the design phase of a project. When I'm designing, I don't use models. I just use section and floor plan. But when I have a project I'm going to now give over to an intern to do the working drawings and teach them how to do the working drawings on it, I have the intern build a model because that's the best way for them to understand what I'm trying to design. Oh, they saw this one already. So these were really elaborate pencil drawings with a lot of cross hatching, and they're all done on 1000H paper, and they're just time consuming. And this particular one was, you know, I reached the point where this was somewhere in 1978 or 79 or so, I'm not sure of the date, 76, and I said, this is the last time I'm going to spend hours and hours doing presentation drawings. But usually I just show the client the floor plan. Even on a house, I show them the floor plan, and then when they tell me the floor plan works the way they want to have it work, then I'll show them some sections. But I don't get into these elaborate drawings anymore because my clients don't ask for it, so I figure I might as well save some money and not do it. I don't want to sound like I'm money hungry, but you know, there's other things I want to do also in life, so I don't want to be 16 hours a day in my studio. But I have to admit, when I look back at it, it was a lot of fun. And there's something really special about a hand drawing. And I once, about 10 years ago at the Guggenheim Museum, they had an exhibit of drawings from Frank Lloyd Wright's Taliesin, and I knew a number of people that went there, and when I went through the exhibit, I was able to look and I said, oh, that drawing was by Jackson, and you can just tell by the way he drew a line, the way the line started, the way the line ended, and then by the lettering, his lettering technique. But you can't see that on a computer, so you know, that was one of the joys of hand drawing, is the fact that everyone's drawings were slightly different, and you can tell who did each drawing. But these were drawings that I personally did. Now this drawing was done by a woman who was working for me at the time, and this is her hand drawing. This was my drawing. These are just all pencil drawings.
You preserve these really well.
Oh, well, they get folded, they get curled up and put in a tube and just, stay there.
So they are nicely kept. At least you archived them really well.
Well, they were just, recently I brought all these to India with me, and we did the scanning here in India. This scan is, the previous scan was off of a brown line print, so I didn't have the original drawing for this one, so I just had a print because this was done for a Saudi client, and one of the things they insisted on was taking all the original drawings, so only when I was able to sneak something out did I have a record of it. We have all fir trees in Oregon, so they're really easy to draw. All you have to do is scribble. This is a working drawing, and this was done by a woman that was a draftsman in my office at the time. This was a commercial building. These are section drawings through it. And that's the site plan, and that's the presentation site plan. So that drawing I did, and that's another commercial building that was built, and that's just an elevation. It's on the website, so you'd be able to find it. It has weathering steel, and that's just the floor plans to it. They were very simple plans. And this was a church I did in Ohio, and this drawing is my drawing, and it's another pencil drawing. But I always try to integrate the landscaping and the parking into the building so that the building and the landscaping and parking all relate together. So if you go to the first two, is a section through the sanctuary area of the church, and then the next drawing over was a elevation of the church. So sometimes I do get into an elevation, but it's usually I stop at the section, but this was a fun elevation to draw, so I did draw this one. But I don't hold a lot of value in the exterior elevations, but in working drawings I get fanatical about interior elevations. But that should be all of them.
Thank you once again.
Yeah. Well, you gotta stop and just go keep on showing things.